Imagine having just 10 minutes to design something that millions would use for nearly 2 decades. That's exactly what happened when Steve Jobs, the visionary behind Apple, took charge of the original Macintosh calculator design. But here's the kicker. It wasn't a solo act. It was a masterclass in collaboration and real-world testing that holds invaluable lessons for anyone developing, well, anything. The story, as recounted by Andy Hertzfeld on folklore.org, begins with Chris Espinoza, another early Apple employee. Espinoza diligently created a calculator design for the nascent Macintosh operating system and eagerly presented it to Steve Jobs. What followed wasn't exactly a pat on the back. Jobs, known for his exacting standards, and perhaps a touch of bluntness, didn't mince words. "Well," he reportedly said, "it's a start, but basically it stinks. The background color is too dark, some lines are the wrong thickness, and the buttons are too big." Ouch. Espinoza, undeterred, went back to the drawing board, tweaking and refining his design based on Jobs' feedback, presenting new versions day after day. But Jobs remained unsatisfied, always finding something else to critique. And this is the part most people miss. It wasn't about being difficult. It was about achieving perfection through iteration and a deep understanding of the user experience. Espinoza then cleverly created what he dubbed the Steve Jobs Roll Your Own Calculator construction set. This ingenious tool allowed Jobs to directly manipulate the design elements himself: line thicknesses, button sizes, background patterns, the whole shebang. Within minutes, Jobs zeroed in on a design that clicked. This design, born from rapid iteration and direct manipulation, became the standard Macintosh calculator for an astounding 17 years. So, why was this approach so effective? First, it empowered Jobs to make changes in real time. He could instantly see the impact of each adjustment, a process he clearly valued. Jobs was a tactile person. He needed to touch, feel, and use potential products. Think about the iPhone screen. The switch to Gorilla Glass wasn't just about aesthetics. It was born from a single day of carrying a prototype in his pocket and seeing the scratches that plastic couldn't withstand. But here's where it gets controversial. Was Jobs right to be so demanding? Some might argue he was micromanaging, stifling creativity. Others would say his relentless pursuit of perfection is what made Apple, well, Apple. What do you think? Second, and equally important, the process ensured Jobs felt invested in the design. We all tend to favor our own ideas, our own creations, things we perceive as ours. By actively participating in the design process, Jobs felt a sense of ownership, further solidifying his commitment to the final product. This principle extends far beyond the realm of tech giants. Consider this. When I worked in manufacturing, we had a saying: engineers ask you what you need, then give you what they think you need. It happened constantly. We'd request a specific equipment modification, and what we'd receive was something entirely different. While often better from a theoretical engineering standpoint, the crucial question was, did it actually improve our throughput? The answer was usually no. Until we changed our approach. We conceived an idea that would allow us to adjust multiple conveyor guides simultaneously instead of individually. We asked the engineer to draw up the plans, then we took his specs and used brackets, clamps, and whatever else we could find to mock up a prototype directly on the machine. Then, we asked him to evaluate it, not on the drawing board, not in his office, but in the real world, on the factory floor. He tinkered with it, experimented with it, but couldn't get it to work. It was slower, less accurate, less stable, pretty much less of everything we needed. Instead of getting defensive, he grabbed a piece of paper and sketched a quick diagram. "Think this will work better?" he asked. "It looks great," we replied, because his diagram was strikingly similar to our original request. From that day forward, that's how we operated. We'd brainstorm ideas, the engineer would create the designs, and would build rough prototypes so he, and we, could test them out. Sometimes, the result was simply him giving us what we initially asked for. But often, and this is where the magic happened, he'd discover an even better solution. The fault in the original approach wasn't entirely his. We often struggled to articulate exactly what we needed. Creating a semi-functional prototype helped us not only pinpoint our true requirements but, just as importantly, communicate them effectively. So, what's the takeaway? Try it yourself. The next time you have an idea, let the people who will actually use it give it a whirl, not in a sterile conference room, not as a theoretical discussion, but in as realistic a setting as possible. If you're proposing a new sales strategy, let the sales team test it out. If you're suggesting a cost-cutting measure, let the relevant department trial it in a controlled environment. Not only will you quickly see whether your idea actually works, but you'll also empower those closest to the work to suggest improvements and refinements you might never have considered. Because, ultimately, the people who do the job are the best qualified to determine how that job can be done most effectively. And this is a great way to foster ownership and buy-in to new company initiatives. The opinions expressed here by INC.com columnists are their own, not those of INC.com. The early rate deadline for the 2026 Incorporated Regionals Awards is Friday, November 14th, at 11:59 p.m. Pacific Time. Apply now. Now, let's hear from you. Have you ever experienced a similar situation where real-world testing dramatically improved an idea? Do you agree with Steve Jobs' approach, or do you think it crossed the line into micromanagement? Share your thoughts in the comments below.